You might have thought I was an airplane there, but no. I was in the movie Weapons. Just got out of the theater, I saw Weapons, and I am pumped. I thought this movie was the best movie that I've seen this year, bar none. Better than 28 Days and any of the Super Slot, better than War of the Worlds. I know, a tough one to beat, but I really recommend you go see this movie in theaters or check it out when it comes to streaming. I'm going to go into a little bit of spoilers later on in the video, but for now I'm going to do a little bit of a brief spoiler-free overview of the movie in case you don't know anything about this movie and you're curious. So, the story of Weapons is about a classroom of children that all disappear except for one, and it follows the different perspectives of the people in this town as the mystery unravels. Kind of like Rashomon. I know, everybody all don't have to give me a standing ovation all at once. I know, I watched Kurosawa one time, I did it, chat. Someone please give me my film head card now. But all jokes aside, I really enjoyed how each of the chapters overlapped with one another as the events of one chapter led into the other, but it doesn't retread any of the same story beats because these sections move very quickly. I think most of the actors do an amazing job. I wanted to call out Kerry Christopher. He plays Alex in the film. He's the child left in the class and did an amazing job. Usually, I don't like child actors at all in movies. I think they're tough to direct. I think that a lot of times directors, to be honest with you, don't know how to direct a child. But Cregger's does an amazing job here. I think he knocked it out of the park. And I wanted to mention Julia Garner, who plays Justine. She's the teacher of the class that went missing. She's great here, but there's actually not a ton of screen time for her in this movie. And her story feels like the only one without a real fulfilling conclusion. Overall, what the film wants to be good at, it's excellent at, but it does fall a little flat at the end because, I'm going to be honest, nothing could live up to the level of tone setting and in world building and just suspense that you've got throughout this movie up to the final act. I would rate this movie a 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10. Without being super nitpicky. I'm not going to bring this down to like an 8.5 out of 10, even though you could if you wanted to be nitpicky, but this is a must-watch movie, and I would definitely recommend avoiding the majority of spoilers. Obviously, you could have, watch my overview, but let's talk a little bit about the spoilers. Let me give everybody a spoiler alert right here. So the movie starts out a little while after the kids disappear, and we're initially focusing on Justine, Julia Garner's character, as she struggles to deal with the trauma and the fear because the angry parents are targeting her and using her to take out their anger and frustration because they don't know what happened to their kids, right? These kids disappeared from this class, and she is the only one that was there, so they think that she had something to do with it irrationally. One of these parents is Archer, played by Josh Brolin, and he's one of Justine's biggest haters. I swear, if everybody on the earth was dead except for Archer, Justine would have one hater on this planet. So this is where the trouble begins. Because of the town's negative perspective of Justine, we kind of begin with this suspenseful, kind of tense segment as she is at night. She's going home. She's at this conference where Archer confronts her, and she goes up and speaks. She doesn't really know what to say because she doesn't know anything. And as she goes home, she's very afraid for her life. She, makes sure she exits her car when there are people walking by so that she doesn't have to exit the car alone. And as she's watching TV in her house, she feels like she's safe. There's a bang on her door, and she gets pissed off because they bang again. She starts yelling, "What the hell?" She goes and grabs Mace and runs outside, and she sees that witch has been written on her car in big red paint. The chapter explores Justine's feeling of grief and explores her desire to reach out to Alex and share in their experiences, that shared grief. Unfortunately, the principal Marcus doesn't want her to have contact with Alex as the town has a negative perspective of her, and this just would not be professional in his eyes, and I tend to agree with that. However, Justine follows Alex's bus home, and she goes to his house, knocks on the door, notices that there is like a bunch of newspaper on all the windows because nobody actually answers the door. So she does a little bit of exploration, goes around to the back and looks in through a crack in those newspapers, and she sees two people sitting in the house by themselves, completely in the dark. So she calls up Marcus, and she's like, "Hey, we need to do a wellness check on this house." Marcus goes, "I mean, this is a bit ridiculous. I told you not to talk to Alex." And she goes, "I did it anyways, and it doesn't matter because I found some insane shit." And he goes, "The best I can do is give you the professional courtesy of giving them a wellness call." And that's kind of where they break off and show Justine at the bar. It introduces the character Paul, who is her ex. One thing leads to another. And we start the next morning with Justine driving Paul home. And then Justine drives back to Alex's house so that she could check out what was going on herself. So she stakes out in her car. She has her bottle of liquor because obviously she's hitting the lick right now. She has to. She's dealing with a lot of trauma, and that's her way of dealing with it. This introduces us to a little bit of the alcoholic themes or the obsession themes that are going through the entire film. It's kind of a thorough line. She falls asleep in the car. Someone walks out of the house, and they chop off a piece of her hair, and she doesn't wake up because she's intoxicated, and that's where the chapter ends. We then move into Archer's chapter, which is a little bit shorter of a chapter because it doesn't have to do all the world building that first chapter did, but it starts where he's sleeping in his son's bed, and he's woken up by his wife, who is sleeping in, her bed. She's clearly seemed to have gotten over this, and he has not yet, and this is basically the entirety of his character. He's a stoic, angry person who just wants to find his son. He's not over his son's disappearance and will go to any lengths to find his son. He has a scene in the police station talking to the sheriff and finding no real answers because the police in this movie are useless. From the beginning to the end, there is not a single scene where a cop is useful at all in any way, shape, or form throughout this entire movie. It is insane. But this chapter did a great job showcasing the true grief and anger that a parent would feel and just the questions that they would have when going through this. What happened? Why can't anyone solve this? What's going on? Where did my child go? Why did they just walk out, And a lot of irrational feelings and a lot of irrational actions come as a result of this as Archer, throughout this chapter, stalks Justine. He shows up at the alcohol store, the ABC store, depending on what part of the country you're in. You might not know what the ABC store is. It's just a place where they serve alcohol exclusively. He just stalks her. And then the chapter ends when he confronts Justine at a gas station, and then they're attacked by Marcus, of all people, who has blood all over his face, and he looks possessed. He then starts choking Justine out, and Archer leaps to the rescue, kind of creating this juxtaposition of this protector who's able to overcome his feelings of anger at her and protects her. Then it randomly cuts to black in the middle of that fight, and we go to Paul, who is probably the least favorite chapter I have in this whole movie, and it's not just because he's a cop, I promise. It just generally serves to set up the narrative that this is a flawed man. He's desperate for a win. He's going to do whatever it takes to get a win. He sleeps with Justine when his wife's gone. He punches a meth head in the face and tries to cover it up. Overall, just a shitty person who wants to succeed or get just a quick win or any win at all because he hates his life. So he has a scene with the chief, the same chief earlier, where they said they can brush this under the table, kind of further showcasing how this police force is utterly useless and, to be honest with you, not even really trying to figure out what happened in the situation, and if they really wanted to, if they really dug deep and had any sort of competence, they probably could have figured this out. And then after that, Paul walks outside, sees the meth head, whose name is James, outside. He thinks he's there to report him for police brutality, and we cut to black after he chases him, and we move into our next scene, who is, of course, James, who is the meth head. Then we flash to James, who actually reveals an overarching theme of this movie: addiction and obsession. So while not really progressing the overall, it starts with him being out of dope and his desire to score more. This whole section feels like a fever dream as we flash from his encampment to the scene with Paul, to him robbing Alex's house because he thinks no one is home, and discovering the two that we saw earlier in Justine's chapter sitting in the house. They're basically puppets. He tries to snap in their faces to get them to wake up. He's like, holy shit, this is weird. And then he just goes ahead and leaves because this is weird, they're not reacting. But on the way, he stops by the basement to see if there's anything left to steal, and he finds all 17 of the children in the basement. Insane. So when he discovers the children, he steps on a salt line, which activates the two that we had seen before, and this kind of initiates the idea in your head of what's going on here. You've got a salt line, you've got a lot going on here. There's just a lot of different elements that are kind of indicating what this mystery could be at this point. But James actually escapes, and when he goes to try to sell all the stuff he robbed, he sees a $50,000 reward poster and goes to the police station. So that's what he was really doing, not trying to report police brutality, but he gets chased. James tells Paul, hey, I know what's going on with this house. I promise you, I've seen this. I'll take you there. So the chapter ends. They takes him there. Paul walks in and then walks out as if he's possessed. and then comes over to the police car and drags James into the house. We then go to Marcus, the principal, and this is the big reveal chapter of the movie. This is where the big chutzpah comes in. So the part of this chapter that matters is Marcus listens to Justine. He does want to make a wellness check on Alex, so he calls up the family, and then the aunt comes in instead of a legal guardian, and he has an issue with this. He lets her know that he has to speak to a legal guardian, and this is non-negotiable. That's when the aunt looks over and she sees out of the corner of her eye, she's very irritated, a ribbon that he has for teaching, and as she leaves, she secretly steals that. And then we cut over to Marcus's house where he's having lunch with his partner. They're having an insane amount of glizzies. They're having like 8 glizzies for no reason, and Gladys, the aunt, shows up at that house again, and she is all out of breath. She's acting like, you know, she just had a big trek to get here, that she missed her bus, and she needs some water, she needs something of that. So they let her come in, they give her a bowl of water because she asked for a bowl of water instead of a glass of water. I mean, we don't know what that's about. And then the big reveal of the movie happens. She pulls out a stick, she cuts her hand, they freak out. As they're freaking out, Marcus's partner goes to give Gladys, the aunt, a piece of tissue to wipe it off, and she cuts off a lock of his hair. And as she does that, his partner freaks out, steps back, but this whole time she's got this stick, and she's wrapped that ribbon she stole from Marcus around it. She breaks it. Then she takes another ribbon and wraps the piece of Marcus's partner's hair around that and snaps that, and Marcus instantly goes to kill him. He goes to slam his face straight into his face, over and over. It is one of the most brutal scenes in the whole movie. Thankfully, most of it is out of focus. They don't truly ever focus on it, but it is insane, the detail and the depth that they were willing to show here. But this reveals to us why Marcus has that bloodied, possessed look, and it also reveals to us that we're dealing with a witch here. We're dealing with voodoo. So what she does is she takes that lock of hair she cut off of Justine, wraps it around another stick, and cracks it, sending Marcus after her. So then we cut to Marcus essentially running after her in the fight scene with Josh Brolin. So after they have that fight scene, Justine gets away, she drives off in a car, and Marcus chases after her until he gets slammed by a car so hard it decapitates the top half of his head. And it is insane, and also additional foreshadowing to the end of the movie. So we finally get to the reveal in detail as we flash to Alex's perspective. We go back to the days before the children disappeared, when Gladys, Alex's hospice-level great aunt, caused the family to let them know that she needs help. This leads to Gladys appearing and taking control of Alex's parents through voodoo, the two we see in the house the whole movie, and Alex himself being tortured emotionally and mentally by Gladys as she seeks a way to reverse her dying. We see how she traumatizes Alex by forcing his parents to stab themselves in the face with forks, and how she intended to use his parents as a way to reverse her aging. Kind of another nod to that addiction, that obsession with living, that obsession with life and never aging and being young forever. But it wasn't working to use his parents to de-age herself. So she sends Alex to go get some personal items from the 17 kids in the class so she can do her voodoo on them to attempt to use them to reverse her aging. So he goes, he gets the name tags from each of the students' personal, like, cubbies. If you guys have ever been in a school, you guys know what I'm talking about. And then takes them to her. She then does her big spell, and of course the premise of the movie is revealed. All 17 kids ran out of their house like an airplane, like that kind of. And we have the big reveal explained. This is where I want to highlight Carrie's performance. It really shines in this chapter because he's the main character of it, but the level of trauma that he's able to act out and the level of restraint that he's also able to show as Gladys is forcing him to be quiet, otherwise she'll kill his parents. The scenes where his aunt manipulates him by telling him she will leave if she gets his classmates things and she gets better, they're all just insanely well acted. So as the movie reaches its final act and we know all the reveals, we know why everything's happening, we get this awesome sequence of Justine and Archer entering the home together after he sees that she isn't responsible for all this, and they walk over a salt line in the house. This activates Paul and James, who have been voodooed into submission. There's a really funny moment when James and Archer fight, and Archer overwhelms James, and he keeps knocking him out. He punches him in the face, and then 3 seconds later, James would get up, and like a zombie, basically, like, what? And then it pans over to the fight scene with Justine and Paul, where Justine has this big emotional moment as she's being choked against the wall, and she takes Paul's gun to shoot him in the head to get him to stop. So then it pans back to Archer walking to the basement to find all the kids, and Gladys is down there as well. This is all a very fast pace. This all happens within the span of 5 minutes, and she charges him and is able to get a piece of his hair, and it locks him under her control. We flash up then to Alex, who wants to get into the witch's room for some reason we don't know yet, but she's put his parents guarding the room. He kites them like he's Emerald in League of Legends around his room. It is insane. Someone check this man's computer for hacks or something, because it's so insane how he can kite around and then he's able to get into the witch's room, slams the door behind, and you get some homages to The Shining here as she slams into the door, like punching through it, and she puts her face through it, you know, like Jack Nicholson does in The Shining. But Alex goes into the bathroom where he finds, you know, the stick with all the kids' hair wrapped around it. He pricks his own finger with it, and then he wraps Gladys's hair around it to break it, sending all 17 kids after Gladys, which sets off the most insane part of the movie yet, where all 17 kids go on a John Wick-style chase, trying to catch Gladys and rip her apart, legs, arms, and everything. And when they do catch her, that is what they do. The most brutal scene of the movie is as they rip the top part of her head off, ending that foreshadowing loop we saw earlier where Marcus got hit by the car and then half of his head fell off up to his jaw. They do the same thing. She looks exactly the same as him with that, and then she's just got all of her parts strewn over the lawn as these kids are finally free, and they're just standing there. They don't know what to do. They've been under this voodoo spell for 2 years, and they have some damage to their brains. They've got, you know, they don't know what's going on. They have no sentience yet. This is pretty much where the movie ends, though. Archer comes out to find his son. He has this big reunion. We don't ever see Justine again. And Alex, they mention that he goes and lives with another aunt who's very nice. His parents are still messed up in the head, still eating soup, you know, things like that. Overall, as mentioned before, I do really love this movie, even with the critiques I do have. I think the tone and the suspense that this movie is able to achieve is unrivaled, along with the cast elevating every scene they're in. There is no cast member that's bad here. I will say, unfortunately, I feel like the movie ends a little early, as Justine's character is pretty much double fucked. While she probably has that vindication from the town thinking it was her fault, we don't see that. We never see anything, again, after she shoots Paul in the head. I'm sure there's a lot going on there. Maybe she's messed up about it. I assume so, but she also has no ending scene with Alex, who she has been trying the entire movie to get to the bottom of what's going on with this kid. You know, she's trying to figure out, you know, can I help him? Can we share in this grief together? They have no scene where they're actually able to share in that grief, which it felt like it was set up in the first chapter for them to do. Anyways, that's everything I had to say. If you made it this far, make sure to subscribe and let me know in the comments your thoughts on the film. And if you think I'm the worst scum on the planet for my film takes and that they're all dog shit, let me know that too. But thanks for tuning in. Have a good one. Stay safe.